Okay guys, we are now inside of the 2024 Wrangler Rubicon 392 Final Edition. Long name, yes I know, but let's go take it on a drive. Of course we have that 6.4 liter SRT HEMI V8 under the hood, and let's throw up some fun engine specs to see what's happening with our accessory gauges. For some fun, we have our coolant temp, oil temp, pressure, trans temp, and battery voltage. We can also see our vehicle dynamics on here going through our transfer cases, but we can also pull up that information as well on our main display in front of us, which is fun, but it is a little tiny. Thankfully, we still have these cool looking analog gauges, which I do think fits the Wrangler style just a bit. And let's head off. Now, before we do head off, we do have this performance exhaust function, which greatly increases the sound of the exhaust to the point of waking everyone up in your neighborhood if it is at nighttime, but I think it sounds good even in its regular application. Now, inherently, this is an off-roading vehicle. We have 35-inch all-terrain BF Goodrich rubber on here. We have our transfer cases. We have our locking differentials. We have increased ground clearance, almost around 11.6 inches. This is a pretty serious vehicle. We can ford like 37 inches of water with no problem. So you have all that capability on the vehicle, but you also have that V8 engine under the hood, which really transforms all of the dynamics of this Wrangler on a few different fronts, not just the sound, but also in terms of how this thing can perform. And when you really are stepping on it, it almost feels like the whole front end lifts off the ground. It's that much torque going through this drivetrain, and it definitely makes for an interesting driving experience, especially in terms of fuel economy. If you're coming from like a Wrangler 4xe or even a Wrangler with a V6, this is gonna tank your fuel economy down into the teens, maybe even into single digits at times, but that all comes at that wonderful fun cost of having that engine under the hood, which enhances fun, I think, more than anything else. And exclusivity, as this vehicle does cost over $100,000, and I don't know that many people that are just wanting to go out there spending $100,000 on a Wrangler, other than to have this unique special edition and just to have it for the sake of it, which is I think one of the reasons why they just built this vehicle. It's like they're getting rid of the V8, let's just store it in everything that we have. Now, like I mentioned before, we have the performance exhaust system over here, and opening that up really does increase sound inside and especially outside of the Wrangler. Just have a listen to this. And that was just a light throttle application on the Wrangler 392, and Car and Driver and a few other magazines have actually been able to get this thing somehow around 4 seconds to 60 miles an hour with these aggressive all-terrain rubber and the boxy square nature of the Wrangler, which is quite a surprising feat. But I can totally believe it. This thing is incredibly quick with 470 horsepower and torque going through this ZF 8-speed automatic gearbox, and it's not typically tuned like a normal ZF 8-speed. It's a little bit more slow and sluggish, specifically tuned for this powertrain, because it's not inherently a sporty vehicle at the end of the day. But since it is a nice naturally aspirated V8, no supercharger or twin turbos to worry about here, you can rev it all the way out, and it just starts building that power higher in that rev range as naturally aspirated engines typically tend to do. And it's just a heaps of fun to drive around. Even in more just cruising around situations, you can kind of hear the low rumbling of the engine as it switches down 4 cylinders for some fuel economy activations. It's just a fun vehicle to drive around, and I think it's really impressive that they were able to even fit adaptive cruise control onto this thing. There's no sort of lane keep assist or anything, but it's still pretty fun to work around. Now, the one downside of, I think, all Wranglers in general is that they don't particularly have well sound insulation, and this one, especially since we have this power one-touch fabric roof, which you can definitely hear some road noise coming in from up there, and all around you essentially is pretty much half this vehicle can kind of take off if you wanted to, like the doors, the roof, the windshield as well. And at higher speeds on a highway situation, these tires are so big that you kind of start feeling the vehicle wander just a little bit across at highway speeds, especially over 60, 70 miles an hour. You're definitely going to notice that a lot more so. And another thing with the Wranglers is that they are not particularly fond of corners and going quick around any sort of corner area, as it's just not what they're designed to do. They're designed to take those low speed, rock crawling maneuvers, disconnecting your sway bars. And, you know, as much as I would love to demonstrate that for you guys, we just don't live in an area over here that we have those impressive, fun off-road trails to go and tackle all the time. And I think most of these Wrangler 392s at the end of the day are going to end up in mall parking lots and in people's driveways. And there will be that few small percent that's going to take them to their full advantages in off-road situations. But as a summer vehicle, even maybe as a second vehicle, wanting to cruise it around town, it's a really fun prospect. And you still have that unique Wrangler charm. It's a lot shorter and narrower and a little bit more agile than you may think it is, especially coming out of something what I just had was a Bronco Raptor. That thing felt like a monster on the road. It was so wide, I felt like I was gonna be edging out of the lanes at all times. This, I don't really have that worry. It's even coming into some parking spaces, you get out of it and you're like, oh, that's a lot narrower than I thought it was going to be. It's narrower than some small compact SUVs on the market today, which is something you don't realize until you get into one and drive it around. But of course, as a sort of quote-unquote final edition, even though they're making this for just one more model year after announcing this was a final edition, it's still got to appreciate this fun aspect to it. There really is nothing like this on the market right now. There's no true Defender anymore. The Defender itself is a unibody platform. Of course, it's very, very capable, and you can get a V8, but that costs now $160,000. This, while it's the final edition, it's around $100,000. You can still get a 392 used on the market, probably in the under $80,000 or $70,000 range at this point, as they've been on sale for quite a bit sometimes now. So if you want a Wrangler V8 and don't want to spend loads of money doing an aftermarket conversion, it's kind of nice that Jeep was able to stuff it in themselves, and especially put the 6.4 liter unit in it as well with that SRT tuning. And of course, you can open up your one-touch power soft top pretty easily. Just press this button, and then you can really hear that V8 roar at all times around you and above you. And as anyways, guys, thanks for joining me on yet another video, and stay tuned for more coming on Allcarnews. Cheers. If you were curious how the Wrangler 392 is on the highway, here we are. It's loud. It's still loud. Even loud and incredibly fast. Thankfully we have strong brakes behind that. But this thing is, it's just a monster on every road surface. And the one thing about the highway is, and this goes for really any Wrangler with these large Rubicon style 35-inch rubber, on the highway, you know, it's kind of all over the place with this steering and this chassis setup, and at the end of the day, this thing is a brick on wheels. It's an interesting experience on the highway. This is actually one of my first times really driving and testing out a Wrangler for a long period of time, and what I found really is this versus a Bronco especially, the Bronco feels a little bit more livable, I think, on a daily basis. Even with larger tires on it, it doesn't feel like it's wandering around on the road as much. It feels a little more substantial, a little more sturdy, but there's this unique feel to the Wranglers that the Bronco does not offer. The narrowness of the Wrangler, which really is a benefit both on on-road situations in terms of parking, but also in off-road situations, because you don't really want a massive vehicle on trails, especially for a super overly wide vehicle. So I think that the Wrangler still has a lot of benefits on that aspect, as well as some maneuverability things as well. But you know, in day-to-day driving, I think it's pretty good. And we have that adaptive cruise control if you dare to use it on the highway. It honestly works quite well. Radar adaptive cruise, and all it does is really going to be changing the following distance and your set speed with the vehicle in front of you. You're still going to be in full control of that steering, because this thing does not have any sort of lane keep or lane monitoring assist whatsoever. I'm not sure if any Wrangler actually has that just yet. Hopefully we'll see that in the future, because I think that's going to be a feature that would be nice to have for especially all those 4xe owners and your day-to-day Wrangler owners who are just driving them around town. And that's pretty much where that vehicle is going to live all the time, and not necessarily on any sort of off-road trails. Now, as you hear there, above 3,500 RPM, even with this exhaust in its quiet or off setting, it opens up. So every time you go over 3,500 RPM, it will open up. But thankfully, you know, when you're stepping on that gas, you really do got to press it really deep down to get it over 3,500 RPM, because I think in that day-to-day driving style, below 3,000 is honestly where you really need to be. You kind of get up to speed pretty quickly already, and it sounds quite good. But when you have that exhaust on, you're going to be getting that exhaust in full rev range, so it's going to always be burbling and rumbling. And one thing to note, actually, and I'll try to demonstrate this right now, is when you are in 4-cylinder mode. So this has a cylinder deactivation to attempt to save you some fuel. There is this burble and resonance from the exhaust that is just a little unpleasant to the ear when your performance exhaust is open. Now, obviously, easy to fix. You just close your performance exhaust, but it only usually turns on that 4-cylinder mode above 20 miles per hour. Let's see how it's going right now. And we're in 4-cylinder mode. You can kind of hear that drone coming from the vehicle in 4-cylinder mode. I think that's just because it's a little bit of an uneven firing order, I guess, for this exhaust setup was originally intended for, so that could be the reasoning there. But otherwise, not too bad. You know, it's a Wrangler on the highway. You're gonna get a lot of noise in here, especially from this roof here. And yes, it's a really cool roof. I actually quite like this option. Again, pretty expensive at $3,000, but I think it's kind of worth it at the end of the day if you don't want to keep taking the roof on and off. If you do want that, go for the other roof options. But since it's such a thin piece of fabric, as you can see right there, very thin, I can kind of like almost poke a hole through it if I tried hard enough. You hear a lot of wind noise either flowing over it, or you can hear some things echoing around you. There's no sort of flapping or anything. There's nothing gonna be flapping and bothering you while you're driving, which is a great thing. But you definitely do hear some more noise than expected in this cabin. And obviously with these massive tires, you're definitely gonna hear some more road noise. Though, turn on the exhaust button and just drown out everything with the V8 sound.